The International Court of Justice has delivered its interim judgment. And even a political body appointed by the United Nations General Assembly, whose members are mainly non-democratic states, couldn't bring itself to order Israel to cease fire. But we do not have to be grateful to them for that. They had no moral right to order Israel to cease its just war of self-defense in the first place. What these so-called judges should have done is to express the gratitude of the international community of civilized nations for the bravery and sacrifice of Israel's young soldiers, who, as we speak, are going door to door to fight and defeat the forces of barbarism in the Middle East, so that many of you listening to this who live in the free world will one day not have to do it for yourselves in your own cities to protect your own children and grandchildren. This is not 1938. It's 2024, and the Jewish people do not have to go on our knees to beg for the right to defend ourselves against those who seek to exterminate us. My name is Warren Goldstein, the Chief Rabbi of South Africa, and here's why I say that. With God's blessings, we have a sovereign Jewish state for the first time in almost 2,000 years, protected by a powerful army, ensuring Jewish blood is not spilt with impunity. The October 7 attacks were the bloodiest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. But we are not living in Holocaust times. The Israel Defense Force is defending Jewish lives and making sure such an attack can never be repeated. In time, the vicious jihadi terror group that perpetrated this massacre will be defeated, disarmed, and removed from power. And God has given us another blessing. While around half the Jewish world live in the sovereign state of Israel, another 95% of the other half, the Jewish diaspora, live in free democracies where we have built strong, proud, vibrant Jewish communities. Enjoying full political and civil rights, we are flourishing as contributing members of our societies, wielding influence and power, playing vital roles in changing society for the better. We, the Jews of the diaspora, have the right, the resources, and the capacity to support and defend the interests of the State of Israel and the Jewish people in this just war of self-defense. And unlike 1938, we are not alone. We have allies across the globe, fair-minded, decent citizens and free democratic governments who are fully behind Israel and the Jewish people at this moment of crisis. Our allies can see clearly the justice of Israel's cause, and unlike the ICJ, they can tell who are the real genocidal forces. They support us because it's the right thing to do. Justice demands it, but also because they realize that this is not just a war against the Jews. This is a war against the cherished values of the free world: human dignity, freedom, tolerance, the rule of law, and basic human rights. And around the free world, there are many who are grateful to the IDF for fighting terrorists in Gaza so that they will not have to fight them in the United States or Europe. We have seen this support manifest in many different ways. The rock-solid support of the United States, United Kingdom, European Union and Indian governments, many African countries, including Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, and Zambia, and other democracies around the world. The way Germany heroically pledged to stand by Israel in the dock at the ICJ proceedings, and the historic Abraham Accords with important Arab countries have weathered the storms of the Gaza war. And beyond those signatories, not one Arab nation sanctioned or joined the ICJ proceedings. The list of countries who supported South Africa's ICJ application are almost exclusively dictatorships who feel threatened by free democracies. But we also have opponents within democratic countries. Like the ANC here in South Africa, there are forces within the UK Labour Party and the US Democratic Party and others who are enemies of Israel. But the forces of good are achieving significant victories, such as forcing the resignation of the presidents of Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania. And then again, in the recent publication of the bipartisan letter in the United States, signed by more than 200 members of Congress, expressing their disgust at South Africa's ICJ filing, saying, and I quote, that it perpetuates false and dangerous allegations against the Jewish state and encouraging allies to join us in speaking out against this unfounded attack on Israel, particularly at the United Nations and in other intergovernmental organizations. Diaspora communities throughout the world are strong and have strong allies. Here in South Africa, we are a particularly proud and strong Jewish community with flourishing schools, shuls, and every kind of organization, security, welfare, political, needed to advance the highest quality of life. We were at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement to liberate South Africa from its racist regime. And since the birth of freedom and democracy in 1994, we have contributed disproportionately to our relatively small numbers in advancing the new South Africa in every field of human endeavor, business, law, medicine, politics, and the arts, employing millions and running and funding probably more humanitarian initiatives than any other community in this country. We stand tall and strong with Israel and oppose the naked prejudice and aggression of the ANC government against the Jewish state. And we are not alone in this. The ANC is not the people of South Africa. In the same way that we as Jews have been betrayed by the ANC, millions of other South Africans have been betrayed by the ANC corruption and incompetence. So deep is the sense of betrayal that in urban areas, support for the ANC has fallen to around 30%. And it is the values, religious and political, of most South Africans that make the ANC's diplomatic assault on Israel a betrayal of this country. Just over 59 million of the total of 60 million South Africans are Christians. And most of these Christians are from evangelical churches who support Israel. Millions of South Africans want to see a close relationship between Israel and South Africa. More than that, the ANC's support for Hamas betrays the Christians of Africa who are being murdered and persecuted by Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and ISIS, the jihadi brothers in arms of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. This is happening next door across the border in Mozambique. And the ANC's support for anti-Western despotic regimes also betrays the values of the South African people. A recent poll from the Social Research Foundation showed that by a margin of 6-1, South Africans would rather raise their children in Western liberal democratic countries rather than autocratic ones. In the survey, choosing the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany as countries to aspire to over China, Russia, and Cuba. And so, as South African Jews, we can be confident knowing that we have millions of allies across this country who share the values Israel is fighting for: freedom and human dignity, the most precious values of the free world. We can feel supported knowing that we have amongst the lowest rates of anti-Semitism in the world, reflecting the fact that the overwhelming majority of South Africans are decent, tolerant, respectful, and understanding. We can feel secure knowing that we live in a free democracy governed by the rule of law with an independent judiciary and a robust, tenacious free press holding government and other institutions accountable. These aren't just abstract considerations, they have practical implications. Everything will come out. That is what happens in a democracy. The South African press is already investigating the corrupt business and financial ties between the ANC and Iran, amid allegations that it initiated the ICJ application in exchange for funding to clear its debts and prepare for elections this year. The truth will emerge, just as it did before, at the time of the state capture of all of the government's state-owned enterprises. And if it's happening again, and if this time the state capture is the country's foreign policy, we are going to find out about it. It's not just about the ICJ case. The truth of all of this is connected to South African telecoms company MTN's partnership with the world's largest and most lethal state terrorist organization, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And that will also come out. I've seen the court papers of a class action suit brought against MTN, formerly chaired by President Ramaphosa, by families of those killed by the Iranian Republican Guard. And the matter is now being heard in the United States courts. All of the implications for current and former directors, including the president, for breaching severe United States sanctions against terror organizations and those who support them. All of that will come out and be felt. And now the latest story, broken by the Jerusalem Post, is one in which they accuse South African banks, Nedbank, Standard Bank, and ABSA, of providing funding platforms for Hamas. I can tell you that I have written to the CEOs of these banks and have given them the opportunity to come and see me to provide assurance and proof that these allegations are without merit. failing which I have warned them that there are numerous local, criminal and international anti-terror laws that they may be contravening, and I will personally pursue this case in every possible forum to hold them to account. You see, they and others will find out that this is not 1938. We Jews are not just going to roll over. I've heard from so many senior community political business leaders in South Africa and the United States and elsewhere that we will not take this lying down anymore. The Jewish world is strong, and we have allies in the fight against the genocidal movements who threaten not only us but the civilized world exactly as the Nazis did. We are not the Jews of 1938 or of the Roman expulsion or of the Spanish Inquisition. We are not the Jews that were massacred in the pogroms of Europe. When confronted with fearsome enemies, Jews of previous generations had no choice but to take flight. This generation can and will fight. We will fight back with every measure possible, with dignity, with strength and self-belief, and with the sense of the justice of our cause. We have been through a process to fully grasp this. With God's blessings, we have emerged from under the shadow of the Holocaust, under the shadow of almost 2,000 years of exile and persecution, and have begun to learn that a new era has dawned. The Torah portions currently being read on Shabbat in synagogues throughout the world are those of the book of Exodus, which describes the first greatest liberation movement in history. We read of how God himself liberated the children of Israel from the slavery of Egypt. But the book of Exodus relates how even after they gained their freedom, the generation of Jews who left Egypt still thought like slaves. We see a striking illustration of this. As they were on their way out with the Egyptian army in hot pursuit, they arrive at the Sea of Reeds and are seemingly trapped. It's at this point that they almost give up, crying out to Moses, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the desert? Was it because there were no graves in Egypt?" God tells the Jewish people that they have to go forward, but it was hard for them. And later, when they arrive at the border of the land of Israel ready to enter, they again lose their nerve. When the spies return with their reports of the land, they tell the people, "We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in theirs." They felt they did not stand a chance against the enemies they describe as giants. Fresh from slavery, they didn't yet see themselves as free human beings, as a free nation blessed by God with strength, armed with purpose and dignity. They were unable to enter the land of Israel and had to wait for the next generation to go in. There's a lesson here we need to learn. We have to recognize who we are. We have to be aware of our strength, our purpose, our dignity. We have to go forward with confidence and conviction. In 1938, vulnerable, fearful, with nowhere to run and hide, and no allies in the world, we were sent to our slaughter. But with God's blessings, we have risen from the ashes of the Holocaust. We are a proud, great people with a long history that began when we were born at the foot of Mount Sinai more than 3,300 years ago. We have a presence stretching across the globe with an independent, vibrant Jewish state in our biblical homeland at our center. We have incredible resources and loyal allies. God has blessed us. We need to believe in ourselves, and we need to send the message to all of our enemies that we will not be cowed, we will not be pushed around, and we will not be slaughtered with impunity. This is a moral charge, and we will defend the survival of our people and indeed the free world from the forces of barbarism. Let's go forward with strength. As we say when we complete a book of the Torah, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. Be strong, and let us take strength.